We're treating the whole property and we're looking at the causes of the issue, not just the symptom, which quite often is a gully. We're seeing that the grazing land management change is really beneficial to the whole operation. Obviously, not just weight gains for cattle, and great for land condition. It's great for the landholder themselves. You know, there's a lot of flow-on benefits there. Dare say we're probably yet to see some more as well. If you're treating a gully, you know, you're treating one area and you can have problems. Whereas this, we find once you set on that pathway, there's huge improvements to be gained, and those improvements seem to stack up, I suppose you could say. The landholders are really excited about what they're going to pass on to future generations.
Viterra is a company that's based out of Brisbane. Most of our work is in Queensland, but we do operate throughout Australia. I myself are based out of New South Wales. What we are is the first in Australia, we believe, ecological engineering company. Ecological engineering actually involves the design, construction, management of ecosystems that integrate society needs with the natural environment to benefit both. So what we like to say is that we engineer nature-based solutions and we turn environmental risk into economic value. We've got integrated capabilities. So we do research, we do consulting, and we actually also do operational management. And it's all around land, water and vegetation.
Back in 2020, Viterra won a contract with the Great Barrier Reef Foundation. It's a 4-year project to reduce fine sediment reaching the Great Barrier Reef. In the Fitzroy, we spent a lot of time looking for large-scale gullies to fix, because that's sort of, what we've done in the Burdekin catchment. We couldn't really find a lot of large gullies that were eroding at a rate that would be economically viable to fix up. So we started looking at whole of property management, so grazing land management effectively, as a way of reducing sediment. At the moment, we've got 5 properties involved. They are on the fringe of Rockhampton, generally about 40 to 60 kilometres out of town. That's mainly because our project focused on the Great Barrier Reef catchment. So once we started implementing and looking into this project, we noticed that we could achieve sediment savings for about $300 a tonne, which is quite cost effective. And we were focusing on areas where there was high sediment delivery to the Great Barrier Reef. When we looked at how we would go about it, first and foremost, it was to listen to the landholder and say, what would you like out of this? So most of the time it was obviously water and wire. It was some what we call pasture renovation as well and landscape repair. So as you can see, 4 properties are taking part in the grazing land management. The biggest thing, obviously, on top of infrastructure upgrades is practice change. So you probably heard of, rotational grazing, matching forage budgets, wet season spellings, is really effective as well. A few of the people that are involved with are really interested in multi-species pasture improvement. As you can see in the bottom photo there, the grass looks great, but it's actually a monoculture of Eurocloa. So even the landholders who do have good ground coverage are still interested in benefits to be gained from multi-species pasture through soil health. And one property there is undertaking large-scale gully remediation works. And that's mainly because of the sodic soils there. It was proven that the gully was changing enough that it justified actually doing some repair work. Once we actually started implementing the project, that's when we could bring some statistics together at the end of it. But also, just to let you know, we are still partway through the project. So we do expect more results to come through and more refined results. But at the end of the day, we've ended up treating 22,000 hectares for an average of $125 a hectare. It might sound like a lot over a lot of hectares, but the benefits, we believe, will far outweigh what the input costs have been. So instead of going and fixing up a small area, a major problem area, we have focused on the entirety of the property. regardless of where it is. The whole property is under grazing land management change. So we've found that it leads to more even grazing. A few of these properties have areas where cattle just won't go to, high in the hills, areas of more dense vegetation. And we've found that by putting waters up in those areas, that the whole property is now better utilised, and it's a more even graze. And our early results indicate a large increase in ground cover. Obviously, that goes hand in hand with a massive increase in biomass, an increase in water quality by a decrease in sediment, pretty much. Those are the things that, really kick goals for our project from a point of view to the Great Barrier Reef for reducing sediment and improving water quality. The cost effectiveness of it is as low as $81 a hectare in one area. Obviously, it's higher as an average, but it can be done quite cheaply. And the improvements are long-term and quite sustainable. So we sat down the other day with some of our landholders and we went through what are the benefits to them from grazing land management. We've seen huge increases in daily weight gain for their cattle. Not only is there more feed there, the feed is better, it's more reliable, it's more even, and even during the winter months when the landholder expected weight gains to be down, he's still showing an increase during winter now compared to previous winters. So it's really, showing its benefits there. There's been a huge increase in cattle pregnancy rates as well, which was an unexpected benefit that the landholder didn't expect to see. He's been able to obviously increase his stocking rate with no detriment to biomass and ground cover. Decreases in supplements, breaking the tick cycle. One landholder in particular is actually chasing now sustainability branding. There's been some really great flow-on benefits from implementing a sediment reduction project, really.
This graph we're kind of a little bit excited about. Dave mentioned that through our GBRF project, Great Barrier Reef Foundation, that we're starting to get some data in from some of those properties that started the project with us early. We are 3 years into a 4-year project, so we've got another 12 months of collecting data to make sure that the trends, as far as what we can, through the short length of the project, are being maintained. This is one property, where we've got the most data for. So between 20 and 2022, there was an increase in rainfall by about 10%. That led to a 3% increase in ground cover, which we tracked through remote sensing data. A large increase in biomass, which we use the land condition surveys, the LCAT surveys, kind of before and after, and we'll keep doing those as the project progresses to have a look at improvements in overall land condition and biomass. The landholder tells us that the production's actually increased by 60% year on year, which is like a massive, massive gain. And we've actually also been able to identify a reduction in sediment by 26%. That was actually done through the way we calculated that was actually through our Drought reef credit methodology. And I will put a kind of caveat that that's going to be kind of peer reviewed. But earlier indications are people are kind of excited by that. When we've developed that methodology, we did that with consultation with somebody from the CSIRO, an industry kind of expert, as well as somebody who's quite well known in the NRM space, out of the vertical, or contributed to developing of that particular methodology. And so we are actually able to identify, even though there's a increase in production, we're finding a decrease in sediment going out into the reef. As I said, we're kind of very happy with that early result, but we'll keep on tracking that.
Large-scale gully remediation. So Viterra has worked on a number of projects up there, and we're actually proving up a couple now, fairly large gullies. Gully remediation is a great area of work for a large reduction in sediment really quickly. So a lot of the studies have, said that we need to fix these gullies as well, just like the one behind me here. They take a lot of work. The high-cost methods is about $25,000 a hectare. So if you compare that against $125 a hectare for grazing land management, but on the one example I give here, we're only actually treating a 16 hectare area. So it's a lot of money. It gives you a large reduction very quickly, but it is very, very costly. What are the benefits and costs related to that? So we're only treating the main area. So whatever happens to the rest of the property is still happening. And that could be contributing to why this gully is here. So more runoff, less ground cover. That's not tackled outside of the gully area. Generally, when we do work on a gully, we do the surrounding areas, but, it's definitely not treating a whole of property or a whole of catchment type area. Generally, when we do gully work, the nature of it means that we have to exclude cattle for a certain period of time. Obviously, that's a negative to a lot of landholders. But generally you get increased ground cover and biomass and an increase in water quality around gully repair areas. Obviously, the landholder benefit is you get the restoration of that degraded area in the hope that in the future you'll be able to graze that again once exclusions have ended and the gully has stabilised. In the takeaway messages, it's very clear to see that whilst it's a necessary thing to do for the Great Barrier Reef, it might not necessarily be that cost effective to implement on a lot of properties unless you're getting that extra benefit. Which way do I go? So if you've got a gully on your property, it would be worth thinking, am I better placed to actually improve my grazing management or fix that gully? Pretty much that table there outlines what I've just talked about and the pros and cons related to each. Obviously, the one that stands out and the one that is everybody's bottom line is high cost, low cost. Improved grazing it probably doesn't have to be as expensive as the stuff that we've implemented. It can be done incrementally. So you can do smaller amounts and lead up to a whole of property change. It could be as simple as dividing a paddock into 2 or 4. Obviously, when you're doing landscape repair, you're doing a small area and it requires professional design. So that's something that we have to go to a hydrological engineer for. So, it takes a bit of work and a bit of money. The good thing about grazing compared to landscape repair is that grazing provides both a private and a public benefit, whereas the large-scale gully repair mainly provides a public benefit through sediment reduction to the Great Barrier Reef. But they do have, one other thing with improved grazing, and Andrew will talk about it later, is that opportunity for environmental offsets. So landholders can access additional income or off-farm income by aligning their improved grazing land management practice change with the requirements under the environmental offsets that Andrew will go through later on. It's all about understanding your soil, looking at the history of your land use and practices, what's happened in the past, what has made an area bare, for instance. Obviously, again, with the soil testing, instead of making assumptions about soil, it's really important to maybe just get a few strategic drill holes done, and that could tell you what your problem is. If you're nitrogen, phosphorus or nitrogen or boron or something like that, you may not be aware of that, and addressing those key things can really bring something back to life. The key thing is about really addressing the cause and not the symptom. So quite often your cause can be a long way from where you're seeing a problem, and it might be that you've got to walk upstream, you've got to drive upstream and see what's happening, or the cause may have actually disappeared now and could have happened a long time ago. So at the end of the day, what can I do about it? Understanding if you've got a salinity or acidicity problem is quite an easy one. Most people will know if they've got a saline area on their property and that's affecting vegetation, but acidicity is not as common and it might actually be something you can't see or something you can't tell quite easily. But it actually helps determine your remedial actions a lot of the time. Finding out what your key nutritional deficiencies are in your soil, that's something that actually can be found out quite easily by doing some soil tests in strategic areas. Understand, what you've used the land for and when, how long is a big one. Quite often, especially when a property changes hands, you might not know what happened in the past. It might be really handy for you to either go back through records or talk to the previous owner and ask them, why an area is bare or not performing as good as other areas on the property. And if you're actually implementing a certain land use that may not be compatible with a certain area on your property, it might be key to think about changing what you use that area for and what it might be better suited to. The next big thing is removing the causes. Minimising grazing pressure is a key one at the end of the day, and that links back to the grazing land management that I talked about previously. Actually moving cattle around more often, wet season spelling, you can find that, that might be half the problem there. It definitely makes an impact. And rectifying any issues caused by linear infrastructure. You'll probably find that a lot of erosion around Australia is caused by the incorrect placement or construction of linear infrastructure. Roads, pipelines, fence lines, they're all key areas where erosion, starts. And that can actually start a long time ago and from a long distance away from where your actual problem area might be. But also it's really handy to go and look at your infrastructure from time to time and think, how can I actually implement this better as a preventative measure as well? What the other thing that can do with linear infrastructure is it can divert overland water flows into concentrated flows. Not only that in itself, causes erosion, but it actually can remove water from certain catchments and put it into another area. So quite often roads and fence lines and linear infrastructure that's updated very regularly and ends up quite deep or high or whatever can actually starve downslope vegetation of water. So it's something to look out for, and it's something that can be fixed really easily, and it's something that can be prevented. Look at actually removing any linear infrastructure or changing any linear infrastructure that can lead to that. So depending on what your issues are, there's a whole heap of different ways that, you can restore degraded lands. Sodicity is one that you can fix with amelioration, and it's probably fairly important to seek professional advice on that. You can actually apply things like gypsums, but you will need to know application rates and methods of application. And that's something, you can reach out for help for. When we talk about things like fertilizer and stuff and ameliorants, they don't have to be synthetic. And, a lot of people are opting to use biofertilizers and more natural products these days. The big one is fixing bare areas. So we're working with a few people that have undertaken pasture renovation using no-till methodology, using drill seeders. So these things are absolutely amazing. Can throw the seed in, throw a fertilizer in on top of it, and you walk over it a minute later and there's no impact. And you can actually sow this stuff in over existing grasses and pasture species. The other thing is you've got salinity areas. Consider planting salt-tolerant species, especially, deep-rooted trees, shrubs, and obviously salt-tolerant grass species as well. There's plenty out there. They'd be better suited, and yet again, the cattle, I love them as well. So this is one I've had a bit of experience with, is using mechanical regeneration. So out in the Northern Territory, there's a lot of shiny, scalded soils. No matter what you do to them, that they're not going to be self-repairing. Some soils actually need a bit of mechanical regeneration. But yet again, it's really important to know your soil and get an idea of how deep you might have to go to do that mechanical regeneration, especially if you've got something like a saline or sodic subsoil and you don't want to bring that to the surface. So yet again, just getting a bit of advice before you attempt something like that is really handy. The other thing you can do is add mulch and organic matter. And it might be as simple as, rolling out last season's hay, slashing existing grasses and just leave them on the ground to add some organic matter back to that soil. The other thing is, if you've got large scalded areas, is to consider planting windbreaks as well. I can imagine out on the western plains there, some of the westerly winds might be quite strong out there. Yeah, so if you've got sheet erosion or something like that, getting some trees back just to block that wind can be really handy as well. Fixing rill and gully erosion. Small scale gully erosion is quite easy to fix. Can quite often be fixed with, diverting flows and or just reshaping and vegetation. But generally, you've got to understand what the cause is, and it's generally upslope, increased flows from reduced vegetation. Yet again, and I'll probably reiterate it at the end, is that quite often these things are complex, and the solutions are only applicable to your property, so to speak. If you're not confident in doing this kind of stuff, it's good to go and get some expert advice. From what I can understand, there's some really, really talented people in SQ Landscapes that can come out to your property and assist you with this. Large-scale gullies, these are things like grade control rock chutes, so delivering water from one height to another without causing erosion. Large-scale diversion banks, contour banks, and the types of things that we do, as you can see in the tractor in the picture up there, spreading gypsum, fertiliser, organic matter like mill mud, mulch. It's quite costly exercise and takes a fair bit of planning. The main thing, I suppose, is, addressing those causes and symptoms is really good idea for your landscape. Bring back your resilience. Those areas come winter or summer or good rain or no rain, they're pretty much the same. But any area you fix up, you're going to benefit from in the future. A lot of those things that I've put there on how you do it, all those things result in better pasture and automatically better water holding capacity of your soils. Increasing your organic matter, increasing your organic carbon, all those things lead to better water holding capacity and effectively rehydrating your property.
Dave mentioned when we started out on the GBRF project that we were looking for large-scale gullies. Didn't find them because of a delivery ratio, so it wasn't cost-effective to do it. And so we started looking at whole of property grazing land management. At the same time, the new soil carbon methodology came out, and we noticed that the activities that you're allowed to do for soil carbon farming align really quite well with the types of activities that we actually wanted to do with sediment savings. And so we thought that you'd be able to link them, essentially. And so the landholders that Dave's working with, we had a discussion with them all and just said, if you're going to do a water quality improvement project, with us, you might also want to consider soil carbon farming, to which one of them jumped on kind of straight away. Baseline's already been done and a remeasurement's actually been done. That was one of the first landholders that we started working with. And a couple of the other landholders that we're working with are contemplating it kind of now as well. So we're hopefully that they'll get across the line. But it got us thinking that you can actually start stacking various benefits. So we do have one landholder, the one I mentioned around soil carbon farming, is actually also signed on to a land restoration fund project and is planning on putting some trees in the ground. So these guys will ultimately get payments for water quality improvement, for soil carbon improvement, for carbon in vegetation, as well as payments, co-benefit payments through the Queensland Government for improved biodiversity. And each and every single one of those is geared towards improving the land condition and the potential productivity of that country. And so these ecosystem service markets, we've kind of identify as an opportunity to enable landholders to undertake the activities that they want to do for their grazing enterprises. So I'll take a little bit of a step back again and just talk about ecosystem services and what they are. But basically, they're services which are provided to people by the environment. One I don't have on the list, but one that immediately comes to mind from my background in forestry is forestry. Is absolutely an ecosystem service. The forest provides a service to people, through timber, which we use for housing, for heating. It's probably the oldest, ecosystem service market that's out there. It's just often not kind of identified as that. The ones that you probably have heard of is carbon farming through the Emission Reductions Fund. That's been around now for 12 years, 2011. That was kind of first introduced. Long enough for lessons to be learned and for the market to mature a little bit. So there's constantly new methods being developed, and the government also looks at changes to policy, the way that it's implemented to lower barriers to entry and allow more participation. On the back of that one, the Queensland Land Restoration Fund, I think it's fantastic. The Queensland government recognises that through soil carbon farming, well, not just soil carbon farming, but through soil carbon farming, there's other benefits that come on the back end of that, environmental benefits that the Queensland government's prepared to pay for. I actually think most other states are probably a little bit jealous, and probably should mimic what Queensland's doing in this particular space, but probably a little bit slower to do it. But it's a fantastic initiative. Reef credits is another one. That is relatively new. There's currently two methodologies available under reef credits. One is for nitrogen reduction and one is for sediment savings through gully repair. We've mentioned that we've just drafted a methodology for sediment savings through grazing practice change. That's about to go to Eco Markets Australia, who administer the reef credit scheme, and then that will be peer reviewed. That, we believe, is actually quite exciting because the methodology can be applied outside reef catchments, as long as there's a market mechanism to do that. And also, watch this space for the Nature Repair Bill. I won't go into details with that, but that was announced by the federal government in March, and they put a bill forward to enable more markets, very, very similar to carbon farming. It would be administered by the Clean Energy Regulator, same as carbon farming. I think it will be managed very much the same, but it's geared towards payments for principally biodiversity improvement. That can be stacked with other methods, absolutely. So if you're going to do an environmental planting method or a reef credit method, there's nothing, I don't think, that's going to be there that's going to stop you from doing a methodology under the Nature Repair Bill as well. So who benefits? When we look at these type of markets, we're very much looking for public-private benefit. I kind of mentioned the approach that Viterra takes, and I believe that the approach that most project proponents take is it's all about the landholder. What the landholder wants to do with their business, what the landholder wants to do with their enterprise. A lot of landholders that we work with and we talk to have got ideas on what they want to do. They're just not finding those mechanisms to enable them. So that's where we're turning to eco markets to enable what the landholder wants to do. As long as that public-private benefit exists, then projects will happen. So from a landholder perspective, increased farm productivity, overall land condition and soil health for resilience, such as drought. It provides an additional income stream for landholders. The carbon sequestration helps Australia meet its climate change targets. There is improved water quality through sediment reduction, riparian protection, and improved biodiversity, flora and fauna. So who benefits? Public-private. It goes hand in hand. And how do you access markets? We can discuss with project developers. I've actually had a quick look at who's kind of participating today, and there are a few. But we do it, Green Collar do it, AgriProve do it. There are others. If you want to know more, have a look at the Carbon Market Institute. For starters, they're the peak body for carbon markets, and in there you'll actually find a list of providers. We typically work with Green Collar, AgriProve, and more actually a few others. The ecosystem markets themselves, they can be complicated, but there are absolutely people out there to help you navigate through them. Put this one up, soil carbon farming, just to demonstrate that the activities we believe do align with what a lot of the landholders want to do on their business anyway. And so I've just listed the eligible activities under the ERF, which includes applying nutrients to the land, synthetic, non-synthetic fertiliser. Something else that we've actually just started looking at Viterra is the use of biosolids like human waste for beneficial reuse and integrating that with soil carbon farming projects. You can undertake new irrigation, you can rejuvenate pasture, you can alter your stocking rate, duration, intensity of grazing, you can introduce legumes, you can do a cover crop. All these activities are all eligible under soil carbon farming, and as long as you're undertaking one of them, then you may be eligible to undertake a project. I guess what we tell landholders is if you're trying to improve your land condition, if you're trying to improve your soil health, then there's every chance you're probably going to improve your soil carbon. And so why not, consider undertaking a project? I kind of pick on that one, but there are other methodologies, which landholders can consider, particularly around the vegetation ones. And there's new methodologies being developed all the time. Wetland ones just come out. There's going to be an all-of-farm one, which is being worked on at the moment as well. So there's a few to consider, and quite a few new and emerging ecosystem markets as well to keep an eye on, and consider as well, all to try and enable projects.
At the end of the day, this is just a summary to look back on the low cost and large benefit of grazing land management practice change compared to large-scale gully remediation. The benefits that we're actually seeing coming through for the landholder, for us, it's great. The landholder is so excited. I get phone calls every day saying, look at what's happened to my enterprise. Based on that, we really encourage people to think about grazing practice change as a way to address land degradation. It's cost effective. The benefits are there. And like Andrew said, you might get paid for it one day. It's a great outcome all around. And that's really what we wanted to put these case studies together to prove there is a different way of tackling things, and for people, to consider that, to make that lasting change, that one that's, your family's going to have in the future and say, wow, this is better than when my dad had it. And consider using those ecosystem markets to get paid for it, and, go and seek professional advice if you need help. Viterra are very excited about soil erosion and everything soil, if you ever need any help or assistance from us. And at the same time, Southern Queensland Landscapes got a great bunch of people there. I thank them for giving us this opportunity to present to you this afternoon as well. Thank you for listening, and we're open to any questions.